Okay, so welcome to Pilgrimages Redux, a Mouthy event, which is our program for Culture Days, 3 days of free arts event all across the province, with many going on here in Kingston. I'm Pat Sullivan, Public Programs Officer here, and I'm just up here for a few minutes to tell you how this afternoon will unfold, and I'll be turning it over to others soon. As always, we like to acknowledge the agencies who support the... Can everyone hear me? I should be back on that. Great. We like to support the agencies who we like to acknowledge the agencies who support the presentation of contemporary exhibitions and programs here at the Agnes, and they are the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, the City of Kingston, and Kingston Arts Council through the City of Kingston Arts Fund. As this event is part of Culture Days, we're also grateful for the promotional support from Cultural Services of the City of Kingston as well. We're holding Pilgrimages Redux, a Mouthy event, in relation to one of our contemporary exhibitions, Déjà Visité, Mike Bain, Jocelyn Purdy, Micah Schur, which I hope you've all seen. If you haven't, our galleries are open today and there'll be time after the program. This show is guest curated by Sunny Kerr, who suggested that I contact Michael Davidge and Vince Perez, as he knew they had a presentation performance on the theme of travel, which relates in part to the themes in Déjà Visité. In turn, Vince suggested that we involve Laura Kelly, who has collaborated with him in Mouthy events in various Kingston locales. These are storytelling sessions with lots of audience participation, and we're hoping that continues in this venue today. So our format for the afternoon is, after a few more words from me, I'm going to turn things over to Vince, then to Michael, who will each give a short talk on their respective pilgrimages, in a Redux sort of way. And Laura will take over to facilitate the Mouthy part of things, which is where you come in. I hope you've been thinking of your own short travel or pilgrimage stories to share with us. You'll note that we are filming this event for future posting on our website. And light refreshments are at the back, so feel free to help yourself throughout the program. I'd like to thank Michael, Vince, and Laura for shaping this afternoon's program and introduce each of them briefly before we start. Vince Perez will be up first. He is a graphic designer who runs Ever-Loving Press in Kingston, and in this capacity he has done some work for the Agnes. I'm very pleased to say that yesterday, the Ontario Association of Art Galleries awarded him a design award for the catalogue Howie Choi Friend with Fire, an exhibition that was held here in 2012. This is a great honor from the art community, so congratulations, Vince. And we do still have that catalog available in our shop if any of you want to pick it up. Michael Davidge is known to many of you as he was the artistic director of Modern Fuel Artist Run Centre for several years before moving to Ottawa. He is an artist, writer, and independent curator. Laura Kelly is a philosophy student at Queen's and, as I said, has collaborated with Vince in running Mouthy events elsewhere in Kingston. So let's get started. Please welcome Vince Perez.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, certainly. Sure. Right. We got a handout, guys. Rather a publication. Michael and I have been collaborators for some time on various publications. We're fans of print. And so we've made a broadsheet up for this event. And I think that's available near the refreshments. So that's free to take, and you can use it to follow along with our talks. It includes images from our slideshows and pull quotes from our So I'll begin. I've delivered this particular talk before, and it was a thrill to share this experience with an audience. To introduce it, I'll say that this has to do with the Camino de Santiago, the famous pilgrimage to the Catholic holy site of Santiago de Compostela in the northwest of Spain, where it's said that the relics of St. Paul are buried. It's a well-traveled road, and there's accommodations for pilgrims along the way. And the year that I went was a holy year. A holy year is a year in which the Feast of St. James falls on Sunday. So there were loads of pilgrims. It's a very popular walk. You may have heard of it. Maybe some of you have done it. And as we move along from my talk and Michael's and into our Mouthy event proper, the open mic storytelling, you might want to share your own experience traveling. Maybe some of you have done the Camino. Certainly last time I delivered this talk, there were a number of people who had, and I loved how they gave a different take on the experience. My experience was one of elation and great stretches of boredom, which I maybe should have anticipated. This is what I'm going to talk about, I guess, the boredom mainly, and not the elation. I felt a lot of the former, and so the theme, if there's a theme to this, is silence, I guess. All right, so the title of the talk is Solvitur Ambulando. I'll get to what that means. Mainly I'm reading from a prepared script, but I'll pepper this with extemporaneous commentary when it occurs to me. So at the end of the second day of walking, I flailed in the upper atmosphere of a bunk-filled room, searching for the sweet spot in my mattress. It's midday, the siesta, which is Spain's diurnal chill-out hour. But I'm not interested in rest so much as relief from that overriding silence I mentioned a moment ago. I'm most certainly to blame having led myself here to this albergue, which is Spanish for hostel. And these were sort of pilgrim-exclusive hostels, by the way. I went to this albergue on this 800-kilometer pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, and if I'm being honest, I'd come chasing the very silence that now corners me and that promises to stretch itself out across August like a wet blanket, or more appropriately, a soggy monk's habit. It occurs to me that I'm chafing in this wilderness, that Solvitur Ambulando is solved by walking is Latin, and the Latin is dead. And that right now, I'd pay big bucks for an English language potboiler. What I need, I decide, is a conspirator in silence. Someone to distract me from the infinite and empty spaces, to offer whispered counsel when I think I've hit upon a solid theory or a funny joke. After all, woe to him, the Bible says, that is alone when he falleth, for he hath not another to help him up. I'm not alone in my flawed attempts at silence. St. Anthony, Christianity's original hermit, must have suffered sharp pangs of irony when hundreds of followers set up camp anywhere he went. And although Benedict invented cloisters where he could practice his strict monasticism in the minimal society of his confreres, his writing hints that these were places of compromise for him, and that his salad days had been spent living solitary in the mouth of a cave, eating berries and wearing furs and that sort of thing. Later on in my pilgrimage, I'd hole up a few nights in old monasteries that were no doubt inspired by Benedict, now in various states of disrepair and filled with snoring tourists. I should say here that the Camino, there's no desert, especially in the year that I went. As I said, it was a record-breaking year. The Camino only gets more popular. There are crowds, there's high-speed internet also. So what I talk about when I talk about silence are those long afternoons that seem to drip into oblivion. When you're done with walking and you've seen the inevitable church and eaten the chlorophyll-starved ghost white asparagus in the darkness of the town's only bar, and you triple-check the map, and you tended to your blisters with another folk remedy or some sort of miracle band-aid, and you've engaged in the detached niceties of communal living in the albergues, only to find that you never once coincided with anyone else that just on terms at a level that disturbed or much less placid yourself as like bubble. So the next morning, I limp out of town, testing a newly bombed ankle on a stretch of curb, and my new resolve on a fellow pilgrim. I'm shooting for Torres del Rio, a town called Torres del Rio, which is a medieval pit stop built up by the Camino. A lot of these towns, before the ascent, the sort of contemporary ascent and popularity of the Camino, they were struggling economically, and the Camino has been a boon for them. This one had been anciently tagged as a hideout for horse skinning crooks, and it was reputed to have poisoned the river. Anyway, outside this town, Julie, when she stops to photograph the sunrise through a row of trees, she's American, and that alone is enough for me. I'm a Spanish speaker, but I think that only goes so far. The immersion was, I think, getting to me, and I just wanted to speak in my first language. Our introductions are giddy and they're spelt sounding in our native tongues. We work through a repertoire of questions that culminates in the question, why are you walking the Camino anyway? And this is a common question. And it's one that I don't quite know the answer to, but you're probably not going to get an answer from me during this talk. Practice during the Camino did improve my delivery. There's no good answer, I was figured. No easy answer anyway. 2 weeks later, when I was walking with a prison cook from Valencia called Miguel, he clapped me on the back and told me, in response to this question, that there are 3 kinds of people who walk the Camino. So there are Correcaminos, Correculos, and Correcaminos. That roughly translates to bed chasers, those who race between albergues to score first come, first served lodging. Ass chasers, those just looking to score. And road runners who, like wild coyotes, Sisyphean boulder cumber, neurotically run their course at cartoon-like velocity. If I humorously reply that this answer didn't leave any room for spiritual concerns, he didn't much hear me over the body's Second Republican anthems he sang to pass the time. So the sun is high when Julie and I are now tented buds, and we finish our sandwiches at a bar and decide to walk another 15 or so kilometers instead of staying put in the town next to Torres del Rio. The path that afternoon is shadeless, and the sun on our backs is intense, and we claim to regret our decision, and I think we both felt this, the camaraderie is thick and it keeps us buoyant. It's my first taste of the empathy of the Camino. It's the kind of empathy that comes from shared physical suffering, and it's more compelling, I'd argue, than that empathy that comes from surmising that we all have problems, which we do, the human condition and everything. The empathy derives from that raw corporeal pain, and I believe it accounts for the popular fixation on blisters and blister-related remedies along the way. Most program conversations boil down to a pissing contest about blisters. And they're really boring, but they're unusually comforting. This is a photo, by the way, of not my foot, thankfully, but somebody else's. And it was so grotesque that I decided to take a photo. When perhaps I shouldn't have. I don't know. It's not nearly the worst foot I'd seen either. And so what you see, I don't know if y'all have your own particular cures for this ailment, but the most popular along the way was to puncture the blister with a sewing needle, and you'd thread through, tie it, and so you would then drain the fluids, and I think probably disinfect it with something or other. Yeah, I would recommend if you walk this that you spend a lot of time, thought, perhaps money on good shoes, good boots. Socks are important too. One of the people that I walked with, and I'll talk about her a little later, she had a routine in the mornings of talking to her feet and thanking them and caressing them, massaging them, powdering them. She was lovely. And her feet thanked her for it. In return, she didn't have, it was like a miracle. Right? She didn't have a blister. And I walked with her to the end. So, anyway, that evening, Julie and I, we were sitting outside of the albergue on a bench, and we were looking over maps, and we realized that we had much less time, I had much less time to complete the Camino than she did. And so I would have to outpace her if I didn't want to take a bus for a stretch, which was unacceptable in my mind. So the next morning I said goodbye, and I pulled away from her at an exaggerated clip. Outside the city of Logroño, I lay on the banks of an artificial lake, hallucinating a loon's call, when another vision, one of impeccable posture, goose stepped by. I felt a sudden spasm of the impulse that must propel the corticamus. That was the one that chases beds. And I was off in pursuit, but my beeline to retake the lead was halted by the man's cordial and sing-song, "Hola." Fergal, I gathered from his name and the accent is couched in as an Irishman from Dublin, to be specific, a sizing up that should prove no more difficult than regarding his thick helmet of ginger hair. As a quid pro quo to him, I'll mention his amusement at my perpetual lumberjack's shirt, a red plaid flannel number that I had intended as Brooklyn hip and not Canadian bacon. Fergal is a conversationalist and a soft type A to my relative type B, and this made us a winning team. And over the course of the next week or so, we partook of a high bandwidth stream of dialogue, some of it anecdotal, and some of it quite profound. More than this, we got horribly lost before sunup. We dodged cyclists and juggernauts, which was Fergal's word for trucks. We witnessed some entirely forgettable folk dances and some famous ones like the Jota. And this is all to say that we shared so many small rituals of the Camino that I would feel extra strength bonded to him for quite a while. One of the rituals, by the way, of the Camino is the term Buen Camino, sort of the aloha of pilgrim phraseology. And literally it means how to walk. But it can be a tricky read for pilgrims. It's used in greeting or well-wishing, so sort of sincerely and straightforwardly. Or it can be used to excuse yourself from company or to communicate to someone that they ask to be moving on, who ought to be. And the duality of the phrase seems like a gesture to the transients that you feel on the Camino. The transients that I've been sort of talking about in regards to these people, Julie and Fergal, and folks that I'll never see again. We've lost contact, and they're just these fond memories. Fergal and I traveled for quite a while together, that being about a week and a half. And when we arrived at San Antone, which is another by donation albergue, this one extremely pretty, carved into a ruined and roofless monastery, we agreed that this was perfect. It was an idyllic scene. Its arches span this rural highway, and along the highway were these little cubbies that were filled with charming notes that had been left by pilgrims. And they said things like, meet me in Boadilla, it's not a town, or God bless you, or just mommy, punctuated with the symbol of the cross. This is San Antone. The hostler of San Antone was a volunteer named Gabrielle, and she was a bit of a hippie despot. By late afternoon, she had organized the assembled group around the task of preparing communal dinner, and we sat around to a meal of hummus and watermelon, which was not the despotic part. We were asked to say grace, and rather than Johnny Appleseed Amen, we got Gabrielle's imperative to look deep into each other's eyes and to hold that gaze and contemplate our shared humanity for a micro moment or two, which was, while uncomfortable for me, absolutely unbearable for Fergal, who had already confessed a distinct aversion to anything touchy-feely. After dinner, we were invited to enjoy a candlelit ceremony during which we would share our feelings about the Camino heretofore, and Fergal and I both bowed out and headed to our bunks. I soon noticed that we were the only ones, and when my curiosity began to get the better of me, keep me from sleeping, I decided to leave the dorm and join the others in the ceremony. It was this blur of emotional purging and Franciscan bear hugs and howling laughter, matched only in its ridiculous volume by intense sobbing, and all of it rising over the monastery walls to scare the neighboring livestock. The next morning I woke up late, and I sensed it before I was able to confirm it, but yeah, when I looked below my bunk to Fergal's, he had already gone without a word, and that was our last supper. Esther, the one I mentioned earlier who spoke to her feet, she came in and out of my field of vision for days. On the Camino, you can be walking a little city block from someone for the length of it and never managed to brush shoulders. She was an HR director for Budapest, a single woman of about 35 with a brusque way of presenting her life story, and this was in contrast to some of the daintier women I'd come across. She was, I think it's accurate to say she was a brick shithouse. I have a favorite memory of her, tainted a little by exhaustion, but I'm walking behind her in her Airstream, and I'm following her over for kinky blonde hair as it beats against her shoulders. And she may have been smoking because she was a prodigious smoker. You can imagine walking 800 kilometers as a chain smoker. She achieved it. So I don't want to understate my connection to Esther. We, among many other things, we got bed bugs together. It's hard to place where that problem started, but I exhibited the symptoms first in a place called El Acebo. I asked the hostlers what this connect-the-dot cluster of welts gracing my forehead might be trying to tell me, and they waved away my worst fears with suggestions of packing. But in 2 days' time, I was washing my clothes with extra strength Matapulgas, which is a sort of detergent pesticide used in like little rent accommodations. These beds, by the way, that you stay in the albergues, although, albergues are incredibly benevolent places, they're also fairly filthy, or they can be. There are hundreds or thousands of people passing through and sleeping in that same spot. So I'm in this borrowed kimono because I have to launder everything that I own. And I'm looking pretty ridiculous and pretty sorrowful. And Esther, she may have at that point had her doubts about continuing to travel with me and to share quarters as we did. But she showed no sign, just the easygoing roll with the punches swagger that I so loved about her. It's the same swagger, of course, that would eventually make her a morsel for fleas. The high point of maybe my entire Camino, which is sort of a non-event. It was one morning where the core account was that chaser instinct was again strong, and we woke up at 4 a.m., which was not atypical. I mean, I think your average wake-up time was about 5, and you couldn't resist it. Everyone around you was packing up by that time. You had to get out in the morning so that you weren't walking in the middle of the afternoon, the hottest time of day. But 4 a.m. was even earlier. And we were out with headlamps. This isn't us. This is just a scene reminiscent of this one. It was just Esther and I. And we were walking through a thicket of aliso trees, and there was a curtain of fog. It was quite hard to see. I didn't know whether my socks matched, frankly. And we sensed a crossroads up ahead, and an outlying bar was open. And it was preparing for the rush hour, which would have come maybe 2, 3, 4 hours later. We ducked into asked directions and then back out and into the trees. And we were making a kind of a silly chat in the pitch dark as a kind of way to echolocate. And I felt it was important that I be in that place, if just for one other person, and if just as a friendly bit of volume to help guide the way. And then in an hour from that, the sun rose, and it was glorious. It was this gradient of violet, and it cast the clouds in a golden wash, and it reminded me of the communion plate, and that we were getting very close to Santiago. So Santiago is, in my mind, a non-destination. I have no satisfying photographs of arriving there. In fact, many pilgrims express a sharp disappointment at reaching it and pass right on through. That's what Esther did, stayed the night in the convent and then set course for Finisterre, which is the land's end of the Iberian Peninsula. I thought about this disappointment in spades. Was it that we hadn't changed when we had hoped so purely that we would? Or just that the vacation was over? Was it that for all the hype, Santiago was not Jerusalem or Rome, and that its connection to the holy was apocryphal at best? In one sense, it was maybe kind of hoaxy at worst. For me, I felt it had to do with a complicated return to civilization, white noise civilization. So about 100 kilometers before the end, you feel yourself surrounded again by that noise. Mid-August is when most of Spain vacations, and many Spaniards decide to spend that off time on the pious project of walking the Camino, but only the absolute shortest length possible while still receiving the Compostela, which is a certificate that announces on parchment paper that you, 1, completed the pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, and 2, inside of that holy year that I mentioned, are absolved of all your sins, full stop. The rush and crush of humanity is jolting, true, and it's easy to imagine yourself as better than the hobbyists and fair-weather pilgrims and to let any transcendence you've achieved fall away from you as you shoulder check someone into the trenches of an olive orchard. But for me, the ugly self that I've described here reared its head with surprising quickness, and it wasn't until I was a few days away from Santiago, carried off by train and bus and cab and metro and car, and now sort of realizing, now watching an in-flight movie, that I was able to flip the nastiness that I experienced on its head. To realize that rather than letting the maddening crowd solve the feeling of loveliness that I'd achieved, I should simply draw closer to those few pilgrims with whom I had managed to match steps. The ones with whom I had built a careful empathy, forged in those fiery afternoon suns, where you feel each other's pain because it's evident and evidently equal, and where the longed-for silence isn't empty, infinite space, but a comfortable hurtling through wheat fields with a bunch of broken, beleaguered folks, too out of breath to talk, no hierarchy, no pretension. How's your ankle, boss? Workable, thank you, that sort of thing. This is my final slide. It's my favorite movie ever. And I think in some ways it summarizes my feelings about the Camino. I don't know whether we have time for questions or comments. Is that okay? Are we doing all right for time? Anybody have those?
Is this a long Camino?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was maybe like a highway overpass. anyone done the Camino? Anyone in the crowd? Yeah? Is that Jenny? What's your thought? Boring?
Yeah, I don't blisters though.
What's that?
No blisters.
No blisters?
Yeah.
Oh god. Alright. This is not the case with me. I'm interested to talk to you about it though. Anyway, maybe I'll let Michael take over from here. Thanks for your attention.
So Vince and I put these handouts together for you today. I was thinking of them in terms of there being a map that would help guide you along the way of our presentations. And I'm somewhat known, I think, for giving overlong, rambling, disconnected presentations. And this was meant to be somewhat of an interpretive guide that would help all of us. Because, you know, it makes sense to me somewhere. And it's within the arrangement here. Somewhere within. Now, this is the pilgrimage Redux. When Vince and I last presented on our pilgrimages, I talked about a trip that I took to Washington, D.C. in 2003. And this trip essentially ended with me taking a photograph of a parkade where I thought Bob Woodward had met with Deep Throat during the Watergate era. And I presented this photo to everyone at the last talk. Well, it turns out that I wasn't at all near where that happened. So, if the object of my trip was to look for America, ultimately, I didn't find it. But I did have another opportunity last summer to travel across the United States. So another opportunity to go looking for America again. And, you know, end up, I thought, okay, Washington, D.C. didn't do it for me. Mount Rushmore is going to be the place. My girlfriend's friend was getting married in Saskatoon, and so instead of flying out there, we decided that it would be more fun to rent a car and to drive across country, and we drove through the states, and so we were able to visit all of these places that I'd always wanted to go to, and all of these, you know, stay with family and friends along the way, Airbnb. Some nice hotels. I got an opportunity to do some art pilgrimages, and I've always wanted to go to the, you know, for example, the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. So we were able to stop in there. But as I was preparing our itinerary and connecting all the dots on the map, and as I was telling people about it, it seemed to take more of a macabre turn because, you know, for example, I wanted to stay in this hotel that was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, which is the only one that's still in existence, still operating, and which is in Mason City, Iowa. But who knew that a short distance from there is Clear Lake, Iowa, where the plane that was carrying Buddy Holly and Richie Valens and the Big Bopper crashed, and, you know, making it essentially the place where the music died. Which is why we have Don McLean's, American Pie, which gave that moniker to the site. The ultimate point was going to be a visit to Kent State University in Kent, Ohio. In terms of an art pilgrimage for me, I wanted to go there because one of my favorite artists is Robert Smithson, and one of the pieces that he realized was on the campus there, partially buried woodshed. I want to go. This is it's become a famous. A number of artists have actually done projects where they've documented their experience going to visit Robert Smithson's partially buried woodshed, and I wanted to have a part of that action. Also, Kent State University is where a number of students were shot and killed during a Vietnam War protest in 1970, shot by the National Guard. When I was telling Jennifer, my girlfriend's brother, about this, he said, "Sounds like you're going on a Wisconsin death trip." And he was more of an Ohio death trip. Yeah. It's close akin to, I think, the Assassination Vacation by Sarah Vowell. I don't know if you're familiar with this book. So she wrote about her fascination with museums dedicated to all of these presidents who have been assassinated, and she writes about her experiences going around visiting all these places. And we had because there's just a lot of time to kill. We had an audio book we were listening to, the Assassination Vacation, as we were driving along and through Buffalo, near where McKinley was shot and assassinated. So that was a running theme. Now, Sarah Vowell, she situates her book, her travels in the terms of pilgrimage, because ultimately what she thought about her travels is that in terms of the traditional religious pilgrimage and her own pilgrimage, was a question of belief behind it. She didn't necessarily believe in God, but the one thing that she did believe in was democracy, and by going and visiting all of these places and feeling the actuality of the people who were participating in the construction of it, she could feel a sense of participation in that, a visceral one. And that is, in a sense, what my travels that I'm going to present to you today are somewhat about. Although I think it's less a case of belief, but more so a case of the suspension of disbelief. In that, essentially, it's about being able to take an experience and buy into a system that structures it for you. Now, death is the ultimate horizon that gives that experience its meaning. And to do a quick philosophical hack job here, I want to make reference to the Hegelian master-slave dialectic, where in the face of actual death at the hands of the dominant master, the slave embraces social death, the condition of his slavery until he dies. So, essentially, we're all living through our ideological systems a form of social death. And that's where we're going to begin today. Although there's hope in that Lacan postulates something that may be a way out, symbolic death. And that is a conscious embracing of the situation in raising it up to another level. And I think maybe it is Don McLean's song that illustrates this phenomenon best. It's about a loss of innocence and a fundamental disillusionment, beyond which there's nothing left but to embrace a radically pure negativity. And so I ask you all to join with me today in singing the chorus of American Pie before we begin. Bye, bye, this American pie. Roll my Chevy to the levee when the levee was dry. Good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye, singing this will be the day that I die. Live free or die. Revolutionary spirit. Gone looking for America. Driving from Saskatchewan down to Mount Rushmore through the Dakotas, we came across a road sign that said, "The Devil's Tower, next left." And how could I resist? Once you have an image of the Devil's Tower in your mind, you have to go there. And so we turned left. It wasn't as simple as that, but we made our way there and visited the Devil's Tower. Now this place, is only significant really for me because that it's a scene, it's a place, a location in a movie. Most Encounters of the Third Kind. That is really its major significance for me. And afterwards, I watched the Close Encounters again, and I was astounded by the way that it really seems to be a story about the artistic process. Roy Neer is just an ordinary guy until he has this experience, an encounter with a flying saucer. And it's coming away from this encounter, he has a vision. He has this image in his mind, and he can't stop seeing it. It recurs all over in his life, his everyday life. He sees it in his pillows. He sees it in his shaving cream. He doesn't understand. He sees it in his mashed potatoes. He's drawn to it. And he starts shaping this form that he has in his mind into the real world. And he can't quite articulate it, but he says, this means something. This is important. And so he pursues this vision. And he does so to great detriment to his own life. He becomes a total slob. His wife and his kids leave him in the bungalow where he's brought in all this dirt from outside, and he starts constructing this massive, to scale, a certain ratio, fills up his entire living room, this massive Devil's Tower, that he doesn't quite understand why he's doing. He's got chicken wire wrapping, he's covered in mud, he's a mess. And, he's talking on the phone with his wife, and they're working out the alimony payments. He's lost his job. And then he sees it on TV, and he realizes what it is that he's doing. So he goes and he goes through against great odds to get there, meets the scientists who are all there. Of course, they're expecting the aliens to arrive. And the head scientist says to him, "Roy, what do you want?" And Roy says, I just want to know that this is really happening. And then the question is, well, how far does he have to go to find out that it's really happening? And for Roy, it's essentially getting into the flying saucer and flying away and never seeing him again. He goes all the way. Jennifer and I, we were only willing to go about halfway up this tower, where we found a perfect photo opportunity, and then we got back in our car and all the way to Mount Rushmore. All the way in South Dakota, every 10 miles or so, there's a billboard that says the Guston Borglum story. What's so great about this Guston Borglum? He's the guy that sculpted Mount Rushmore. The billboard reads, "His story will enrich your patriotism." So, Borglum, he's another obsessive. He believed that America needed its own monuments, and he was going to carve them out of American sources, sui generis. He himself was like that, in that there was nothing in his background. He made up these elaborate stories that explained away the fact that he was Mormon and he was born to the second wife of the father who abandoned them. He erased all that in terms of the stories he told about his life, who would have expected that he would end up studying under Auguste Rodin and then coming and making this massive monument to the 4 presidents of the United States who, as he said, preserved and expanded the Union. Now, it remains unfinished. He was unable to complete his masterwork because he died at the too young age of 73. But had he been able to live on, and raise more funds, we would have had the presidents at least down to their waist. Kind of a bust type of situation. But, the main reason that I wanted to visit Mount Rushmore was, again, because of the movies that I've watched, and North by Northwest is one of my favorite ones, which, of course, is able to subvert or have fun anyways with this great icon of the United States and its union. And so, in terms of it being a bit of a pilgrimage, I was able to go to this actual space and suture my own lived experience with the experience of film fantasy that I've watched over and over again. As I've projected my ideal desires in terms of manhood onto Cary Grant, what I think is the perfect adult male, and a bit of, I think that sometimes I succeed in emulating him. Now, when we got to Mount Rushmore, I was a little surprised to see how puny it was up in the distance, dwarfed by the mountain that surrounds it. It was dark, it was night. I didn't realize it was because they were waiting to start the big light show at dusk, where there's a video that talks about the accomplishments of all the presidents, and they celebrate all the military personnel that are in the amphitheater. But I was really there for Cary Grant. And Cary Grant, of course, his character in the movie North by Northwest he's not perfect. He has problems of his own. One of them being that he's mistaken for the CIA agent George Kaplan, and all of the villains pursue him throughout the course of the movie, trying to kill him, and essentially so they end up at Mount Rushmore in this scenario. There's a Lacanian reading by Slavoj Žižek about this film, but in terms of how Cary Grant's character is absorbed into the symbolic in the way that or the social debt, as I mentioned it earlier, in that he takes on, he's so easily able to take on this name, which is arbitrarily attributed to him, George Kaplan. And it's essentially through his becoming George Kaplan that he ends up in a relationship with, at the beginning of the film, he's got too strong of a relationship with his mother, he's 4 times divorced, he's single. Through becoming George Kaplan, he meets the woman of his dreams, CIA agent Eva St. Marie, and by the end of the film, they're embracing each other and going into what may be the coarsest metaphor for sexual relations ever on screen, a train going through a tunnel. Before he's able to do that, there's this great scene where Eva St. Marie, who is actually a CIA agent, has to prove that, who's in with the villains, has to prove that she's in with the villains, and so she shoots Cary Grant. She stages this big elaborate shooting scene in the cafeteria at Mount Rushmore. And so she shoots him, it's all fake, he goes back, saves the day, we'll train through the tunnel. What the great bit of trivia about this scene, I don't know if you're all familiar with that, but they had to do several takes, and when you watch the scene where St. Marie's shooting Cary Grant, there's a little boy that's standing in the corner, and he's got his fingers in his ear, waiting for the gun to go off. And I think of this scene as a little bit like, the story of the Emperor's New Clothes, whereas, the little boy kind of reveals the whole artifice that's involved in the support of this crazy story. It's either that or, like he points out, the truth, or it's essentially just a state of denial which allows the story to keep going. It's like, yeah, I can't hear you, so the story can continue without being abused of your belief. So we make our way to Clear Lake, Iowa. At this point, the rental car is coated with the guts and the carcasses of thousands of insects. When we pulled up into Bob's Roasted Chicken in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, a guy who was in the parking lot said, "What, did you run into, a pterodactyl?" No, it was the massive dragonflies of Saskatchewan, I think, that left us where we were in that condition. And then from there we drove on into the Iowa night on our way to Mason City and ran, decimated thousands of fireflies as their phosphorescent juice splattered onto the window and glowed effervescently for a few brief moments after their deaths. We made it to Mason City, got up early in the morning to head out to the place where the music died. Just quite near the surf ballroom where they played just before they took off in the fatal plane flight. Still in operation. Kevin Costner was the next headliner at the surf ballroom. But you follow a map. Handily, I've included it for you on the handout there. There's a map that's been photocopied a gazillion times. The resolution is a little poor, but with that, we made our way to the site in the cornfield where Buddy Holly, too soon died in the pursuit of his art, along with Richie, 22 years old. Richie Valens was 17, and the Big Bopper, 28. So there is a little monument at the site and some spontaneous relics and offerings that are left that it's haunting, really. And it's quiet. It was a hot day. It was humid. It was a bit like, the silk on the corn cob when you peel it back. And there was no sound other than the rustling of the wind through the corn and the spinning bundt cake pans. don't know. There are a lot of cryptic things that require great research to come to an understanding. At this point, we traveled 7,000 kilometers nearly, and we were exhausted. The partially buried woodshed was a work that Robert Smithson had created early in 1970 on the Kent State University campus. He had done various land art installations which dealt with entropy and the dialectical movement of the landscape, and so he was working with these various pores, sort of amorphic pores of glue and mud and tar. So he was going to do something like that. He was commissioned to come for a week's residency, do that on the campus. But because it was so cold in January, they couldn't get the real flow going on the pour. And so he decided to go with this option, plan B, which was piling a bunch of dirt onto an old abandoned woodshed on the campus until the supporting beam of the thing cracked. And then it was to be left to the forces of time. The university had signed a contract, and it was supposed to become more and more dilapidated and kind of go back into the earth. So you're thinking of eons of time that this work was going to be participating in. Of course, shortly after that, there were the shootings on the campus, which changed the significance of the work entirely. There was even a bit of graffiti that was put up on it, May 4, 1970, which linked concretely the events on the campus to this shack. And so people began interpreting it in a way of, sort of the death of the American dream, or the fissure in the foundation. And after that, because it was such a sensitive issue and the campus was having a hard time commemorating or reflecting on the events that would have happened, there was this derelict old shed which was to be kept there indefinitely, which was a constant reminder of what had happened. And they were contracted to leave it there. So the university took some steps to rectify the situation, and they planted a grove of trees around it so that you couldn't actually really see it anymore. And so then it became a bit of a difficult situation. Someone set fire to it a couple of decades later, and the pieces were then taken away. So all that really remains of it now is this old, just a stone foundation and kind of a mound of dirt that's hidden in behind a row of trees on the campus. But we were so tired, and we had come to this place where the interpretive panels that are around the site are really effective in terms of evoking the moment where these shootings happened. And Jennifer and I just kind of collapsed into each other's arms and wept. We were overcome. Maybe with the miles and the event, I don't know what it was, but that, in a sense, felt like there was something that was really happening. And in that moment, we embraced life against death, and were able to continue on with our trip, forgetting Robert Smithson and what was left of his sculpture. And that is where I will close my story for today.
Hi everyone. So this is the part of the afternoon where we invite you to come up and tell your stories of travel and pilgrimage and of journeys. Also, there are a lot of seats up here, so for people that maybe just arrived and are standing in the back, please feel free to come and have a seat. One thing to note about this mic is that if you don't hold it close enough, as you tell, and you just can't hear anything. It's got to be about there. So if you do come up and tell a story, which I hope many of you will, keep that in mind. But yeah, Vince and I have been running Mouthy for several years here in Kingston, and we're so pleased to be here at the Agnes Center to hold one here today. And we're revisiting this theme of travel and pilgrimage that we covered in the past at the screening room. We have some storytellers returning, and we're taking a bit of a different slant on it. Also inviting you to tell stories about journeys, personal travel. There's a lot of ways you can interpret that. So maybe I'll let Vince, do you have any ideas that come to mind, like things that people could talk about in terms of like a travel or journey?
Right, well, the suggestion of a personal journey, you know, if you haven't come with the story planned, a lot of folks don't, but something may occur to you as you hear others talk. You may want to respond to what others are saying. It's a pretty open event, so feel free. Are we going to start with one of our ringers?
Well, a few more things to mention. I think I'll open it up to the audience and see if you guys want to come up and tell a story. But we do have more monthly events coming up in the next little while. I don't have a specific date for you, so I put just a list up at the front desk, and if you want to sign up with your email, Vince and I will send you guys a message when our upcoming events are happening. And I think that the next one we have is on the theme of community. So there's a lot of ways you can interpret that as well. But just one thing that came to mind when I was listening to you and Michael speak is just that so many stories that we have of travel are very planned out. It's like you guys had a lot of conceptions of what your trips were going to be before you went. It was an informed kind of journey. And there are a lot of journeys that aren't like that. Maybe some sort of experiences that you weren't expecting or you had no idea what was going to happen to you. So, you know, if you ever ran away as a child, there's something that sort of came to my mind. What kind of other journeys do we go on? So please feel free to just let your mind run with that and come on up and speak about anything you'd like to today. So do I have anybody who's interested and inspired to come up and tell a story? If not, I may have to start picking up on some people, but can I ask either Paul or Emma, we have these two people here today that have prepared things. Would one of you like to come up and sort of inspire people a little further, get things rolling?
I want to go first because Paul's is so good that if I go after.
Okay.
It would be typical.
That would be wonderful. Yeah.
Everyone hear me okay? It's weird to be standing here and just holding it, because it feels like I'm doing like a karaoke type situation. Like I gotta start pacing around.
There's a stool if you want.
I don't know which feels weirder. So I was thinking about, I've traveled a decent amount in my life, and I guess I was sort of trying to go through when Laura originally sort of put the call out there for stories. I was trying to think of like different trips that I might have taken or like cool adventures that I might have had in my life. And I kept thinking about this one thing that's always been a weird kind of mysterious touchstone in my life, which is when I was 12, 13 years old, I was in the 7th grade, I was in a very fancy children's operatic choir because my mother was a single parent and self-employed and needed to get me out of the house sometimes. And so she would enroll me in like extracurricular type things, but I was very bookish and very weird. And so sports did not, like I would just hurt myself. And like I would go swimming and I would be terrible at it. And so eventually finally figured out that I could kind of vaguely sing. And so I joined this weird choir. And it was very intense. It was one of those like immersive kind of extracurricular activities that takes up like all your time. And then people who are really like obsessed with it, like they get into it and they don't leave. Like they start doing it when they're 11 and they keep doing it until they're 25. And the other thing that was sort of my mother was worried about with me, I guess, was that I was never really a joiner. I would sort of just sit on the outskirts of things, and I think she thought that if I was more involved with stuff, then I would sort of become a more like generally socialized person. And so she thought that making me sort of join up with things and not quit, like sticking with them, would be a really good thing. Anyway, so everything was fine. I was in the children's choir. It sort of supported my. I tended to sort of tag along, and there were some tough kids in the children's choir, some really cool tough kids that I got to sort of hang out with and be their sidekicks, and it was fun. And I smoked my first cigarette outside the weird church basement where we did children's choir type activities. And then one day, the woman who ran the choir came to rehearsal. She said, "I have very exciting news for everyone. We are going to be staging and touring an operatic production of The Hobbit that I have commissioned specifically for this choir. And it's going to take a year to rehearse and produce, and then we are going to tour it around the Maritimes in the summer when you're all done with school." And everybody was so, like, everyone just looked at each other, "Oh my God, that's so awesome!" Except for me and my cool, tough friends. Who were like, "That's the lamest thing we've ever heard." And they all quit the next day, but I was not allowed to quit. I was learning to be a joiner, so I had to stay. And then that was the start of the weirdest year of my life, because I spent 3 or 4 days a week in a church basement in like uptown Toronto, learning Elvish and trying on different robes so that I could be. I was a chorus elf, and I was a second chorus goblin. And at the top of the second act, I also was given the honor of being a ballet dancing spider. There's a scene, I don't know how familiar you guys are with The Hobbit. I was not, and continue not to be, but I guess there's a scene where some spiders like throw some rocks and so I had to strap on, like I had to wear like a black sort of like full unitard, and then strap on like an elastic waistband thing with like a pillow in the front, so I had like a spidery stomach, I guess, and then I had to dance around the Hobbit. And like, at this time I was basically like, I was the height that I am now, but I had hair like a dude that loves metal. It was like down to my waist, and I was very like, I thought of myself as being very punk rock and very tough and very disinterested kind of person. And basically the least punk rock thing you can do is like put on a unitard and like mime throwing rocks at like another kid in a flowing elf robe. So I was deeply embarrassed by the whole thing, but I couldn't quit. And none of my friends were there. And this weird thing happens when you're like doing something like that and your friends aren't there. No one you know, like I didn't know anyone in the choir all of a sudden. I'd been hanging out with these 3 or 4 people, and then they all quit. And all of a sudden, it felt like I was imagining this whole experience, because no one I really knew was involved with it, and it was so surreal and so strange. Like 3 or 4 times a week, I would just go into this church basement, and I would sing songs in a language that I didn't understand, and I would like wear these weird costumes, and I would run around miming and dance, and then I would just sort of go back out into the real world and keep living my life, and I would tell my friends about it, and they'd be like, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard," and then that would be it. Anyway, so the production was like very elaborate. There was an enormous puppet that was Gollum that was operated by like 3 or 4 of the children's choristers from sort of above that would frequently like malfunction, and like its arm would drop off like in the middle of the show. And there was like a battle scene where we all had to wear these like flashing pins over our hearts, like these sort of like buttons that flash different colors. And by the end of the battle scene, we were all lying on the ground, and the poor guy who had to be the adult in this production, the one guy who played Gandalf, I guess. You know Hobbit? Yes, the wizard. He would like pick his way through the like bodies of all the like dead like Hobbit elf children wearing these like flashing pins. It was a very dramatic image, but it was super weird. And we did it at the Harborfront Center for about a week, and we all got to take a week off school, and that was amazing. But again, it sort of furthered this feeling of like no one I knew came to see it except for my mom, and like nobody. I just sort of left school without telling anyone what I was doing. I was like, I'm taking the week off, and then like because it was. And so it just felt like I was sort of imagining this whole other life that I would sort of participate in, where I would go and pretend to be a hobbit for, 6 to 8 hours a day and then go home and keep living my cool punk rock life. We rented a Greyhound bus, a broken down sort of Greyhound bus the choir did, and we toured the production around the Maritimes for probably about 3 weeks, but it felt like a year. And I sat in the back with my hair and a sweatshirt from a band called Anti-Flag that had like a star made of broken guns on it because I was for peace, and like in a very like cool punk rock way. And I wore crazy giant pants and didn't talk to anybody. And we toured around the Maritimes, and it was one of the weirder experiences of my life because every night we would stop at a different place, and we would go to a community center or a theater, and we would all put on our robes, and we would all get out the Gollum puppet, and we would just do it, like again and again, and we would stay in billets in every town. And I don't know how they found the people that we billeted with, but I stayed in a trailer in someone's backyard. I stayed in like someone's bizarre like basement rec room that was like being in a kind of like 70s dad paradise. There was like a tiki bar and then every night we would get up and we would get back on the bus, and I would sit in the back and hate everything, and then we would get to the next town and I'd put on my spider costume. I was sort of friendly with people in the choir, but I didn't really hang out with anybody. I didn't really know anybody, and so it was sort of like I found myself wondering if I was going to be doing this forever. Like if that was it, and it seemed like a very real possibility at the time. Like we would just sort of keep tooling around in this bus and like stopping at roadside Tim Hortons and like eating egg salad sandwiches for the rest of my life because I had no real, like I didn't have a cell phone and I couldn't really use the like billet phones to call home, and like I didn't have like really, I didn't email or anything, so I was just sort of like, it was a very surreal kind of cycle to be in. It felt like a Groundhog Day kind of situation. And then I remember the last night of tour before we started driving back home, I stayed in church. It was like me and 3 other girls. They were, and the family that we were billeted with, the father was a pastor, I guess. And he thought it would be fun for us to stay in the church overnight and like sleep on the pews. But like alone. Like it was me and 3 girls, and we were all 13, and he kind of just locked us into the church and was like, well, see you later. Like, and I'm sure that in my mind it's probably a lot more sinister than it actually was. Like I'm sure that I don't remember where the house was, I'm sure it was very close by, or maybe he was just in the front. But it really just did feel like, and I remember lying there in the dark and like sort of staring up at the ceiling and thinking, sincerely thinking that I was never going to go home, that this was this like strange dream that I had just sort of become like trapped in. It was very strange. But I remember thinking, at least I didn't quit. Like that was the thing that my mom, and I think when I came back home and I told my mother all this, and I was like, but I didn't quit, I did the whole thing. I think she felt kind of bad for having instilled that sense of not being able to do it in me, because all of a sudden, like I was telling her about this crazy experience, and she's like, I had no idea that this was what you were. So anyway, for a long time, I forgot about it. I didn't really talk about it because when you're in high school, it's not fun or cool to talk about being in the Hobbit. And then once you're in university, it's super cool. You start telling people, you're like, oh my god, this one time I was touring operatic production of The Hobbit, and everyone's like, that's so weird, and it's hilarious. But I've always kind of felt in my head like I maintained this thing that it was like, it was a thing that happened to me, but it was also something I completely made up. Like, when I told the story, I half felt like I was lying to people, because I had no like corroboration. Like I quit the choir when I was done, and I didn't know anyone else who had ever done it. And there's a couple photos online if you look them up, but you can't see me in any of them, so like who knows? And it always felt like a sort of strange, like it was a fun story to sort of bank on, but it also felt very like insincere to tell people about, because I thought, what if I'm making all the details of this up? It's such a weird thing to have happened. And then 2 days ago, I guess I started coming to Kingston. I don't live here, but my boyfriend does. And so I started sort of different kind of pilgrimage. I come here like once every 2 weeks to visit him on a megabus, which is very different and kind of more mundane, but also a sweet pilgrimage. The megabus is terrible. Don't ever take the megabus. But through him, I met all these like wonderful people in this Kingston community. And this one girl recently moved to Toronto, where I live, and we started hanging out. And the other night we were talking about something, and I mentioned someone's name, and she said, I was talking about someone I knew named Oren, and she said, oh, that's the name of one of the hobbits in The Hobbit. And I was like, oh man, yeah, I don't know anything about The Hobbit. And she was like, well, I do, because I was in this like crazy operatic production of The Hobbit. And I felt so vindicated. Like, I can't even tell you. I wanted to like jump up and just be like, yes! It really, and I spent all night like quizzing her on the details of the thing. And we were literally 2 seats away from each other the entire time. That she was in the same section as me. She was like a backup spider. She was like a chorus goblin. We did the exact same thing. We sang the same parts. She like remembered all the songs. And we were like, we were just like trading like increasingly specific details of like the places that we had sat on the bus and like the different things that we had done. And like I was the first elf to come out in the show. I had to walk out onto the stage and sit on the edge of the stage and pretend to write in a big book with a quill. And she was like, yeah, I remember you, I remember that. And I like remembered her doing something. Anyway, so that felt really good. It felt really good to know that experience was not one that I had entirely made up, and that there was, in fact, in I guess 2003, 2004, a broken down Greyhound bus full of children in flowing robes that toured around the Maritimes for a while, breaking down by the side of the road every once in a while. Anyway, that's it.
It's interesting to hear people's stories that aren't always that pleasurable. They're often quite painful, but maybe seeing it through until the end is a big part of being on a journey in a way, or some sort of a pilgrimage.
Yeah, it occurs to me that we wouldn't have great travel stories if things didn't end up opposite to what we expected, right? So maybe if I was a travel agent, I would throw a wrench into your plans so that you can tell a story like this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always envious of, I feel like, olden days where people weren't as informed by the media, they didn't have the internet, they didn't necessarily have access to the information that we do, and maybe they experienced things differently because they didn't go into their trips or their travel experiences with such a concrete idea of what they were in for.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, like I went to New York just last weekend, and it was so strange walking around the streets because even though I was in parts of New York that I had never really visited before, it felt so familiar. And I was thinking about it, and it's just, I've seen it in so many movies. And I've become intimately familiar with it through media. And it's strange to have these highly informed travel experiences, or any experiences, really. I'm interested in hearing about maybe some stories from people that were less informed. I know I keep kind of pushing for that, but I'm just curious. It's one thing that I've been thinking about. The next speaker I'll bring up is Paul Saunier, and he told the story that he's about to tell this evening, if I'm correct, at the Mouthy that we did on travel and pilgrimage before. And he was the last speaker of the night, which I found pretty unfortunate because a lot of people had left. And it was such an incredible true story, and I'm excited to have him come up and tell it again. So, Paul, come on.
Hello. I feel like there's too much hype for this story. I don't know if it's any of that, but thanks for asking me to tell it again. I'm from Kingston, and I'm a musician. My band, we go on tour a lot, and this story happened at our first ever big long tour. which I guess that was in the fall of 2010. And well, the story kind of amounts to I guess it kind of amounts to like the worst week of my life, pretty much. And we played a show in Toronto, and that night both of my guitars were stolen. Then I had to buy new ones the next morning, and then drive to Chicago. Then we got to Chicago, and all of Chicago's and the area's hotels were booked because of some sort of weird cluster of automobile conferences. So we slept in our tour van, sort of by the side of the highway by weird parking. And while we were doing that, I noticed that we were being watched by weird people, like in the woods. So I stayed awake the whole night, watching them on the side of the mirror. After Chicago, we had a couple days, 2 nights, 3 days. On the third night, we had to be in Costa Mesa, California, in Orange County. So from Chicago to there. And we were hooking up with another band that we were going to do a long, like, 8-week tour with, as we were going to be there over. And the way there, we spent the night in Omaha, Nebraska. And that's when we found out that the brakes on our van weren't gonna, they kept dying, weirdly. And so that was scary, but we didn't actually have time to get it fixed if we were gonna make this show and join the tour. So we just thought we'd chance it. But then by the next night, we had all that day we had sort of ascended the Rocky Mountains. And we had a tour manager who was driving us, because my band is just me and one other person, Benjamin, and neither of us have our license. So my record label had hired this wonderful woman named Irma to be our driver and sort of take care of us. She was also kind of in charge of like budgeting stuff and receiving payments at venues and booking hotels and whatnot. So that's sort of the way it was working. And we didn't really plan a lot of stuff. We just thought, okay, we have 2 nights to get to Orange County. We'll find places to stay on the way. And we also only had a couple $100, basically, to spend after gas. So we couldn't really, we were really just, I don't know. It was it's impossible, for so many bands going to tour just lose so much money. It's really crazy, but we do it anyway. Anyway, we had just reached Denver, and it was dark. The brakes were in and out. We didn't want to go down the Rockies at night when it was dark in a van that was a potential death trap. And we were all really tired, and we were driven for 10 hours or whatever, however long it takes to get from Nebraska to Denver through the mountains. And we were just like, well, let's start looking at the GPS thing. It's a thing where you can find hotels, right? So we're just looking for hotels, and just past Denver, or just before Denver, I think there was a city called Commerce City, which is a weird name for a place, and it should have been let's not go there. That sounds like a level from Grand Theft Auto or something. Let's not go there. And there were all these billboards by the highway. These giant, horrifying billboards that are anti-meth. So it's these people's horrifying, drugged out, scabbed faces that would just say meth, don't do it. So that was what was welcoming us to Commerce City. And we pull off the highway, take a little break, and there's just no lights in this city. And there's just abandoned factories and refineries, boarded up houses. It was some real deep dish, America is crumbling from the inside type thing, that. So in GPS we found some hotels, and I was just calling them to be how much for a room? 2 beds, And a lot of them were closed, but then we found one that was a Super 8, and we went there, and GPS took us on a road that was no longer public for some reason. There was just like this big sign that could have been homemade that was like, you know, trespassers would be shot, and then it was all dark, but there was no power. And our headlights shone on like some people that were all sitting around in like lawn chairs, and they all just kind of like stood up slowly and like, looked at us while we drove. And it was really scary because all day we were talking about that book, The Road. I suggested that we maybe, you know, drive to another town, but, you know, everyone's really tired, she's the only driver, we had to stop, and we all wanted to sleep on a bed and not in a van. So, found another hotel that was called Super 8. And I called them, and this woman answered, she seemed kind of nice, and I said, we want a room with 2 beds, and she said it'll be $50, and that's like half price from a normal cheap hotel, so that was awesome, right? We're running out of money. We had to get to the next show to make money to eat well, you know, and stay, you know, buy the premium gas or whatever. So we go to the Super A. Benjamin and Irma stay outside the van, and I go into the main office. Now the office was kind of like, there's like a desk, and then behind the desk, there's a door that goes to like one of the rooms. And I think like that's where the room is like the private room of, like it's like Norman Bates has a room off the office. It's that style of hotel, right? Everyone knows that. Okay, so I get in there, I ring this like bell, and then I hear like the wall is pretty thin, and like I hear like a lot of people, and like shuffling through like stuff, and then this woman sort of comes out, like opens the door just enough for her to come out, and then like closes it, and in my mind I was thinking, this town is mostly boarded up, and it's like, already this place was so weird and kind of scary, but I was just thinking like, well, I don't want to be scared of a place because it's like impoverished, you know? I want to keep a positive, non-judging attitude. So I was just, everything was fine. This woman came out, and she was like short and had like red curly hair and was like, had like red freckles, which was strange. I've never seen that really. And she gave me like a room key, and then I couldn't pay with a credit card, it was cash only. And it somehow in a discussion, like I wanted to make a phone call, there was no phone hookup. There's also no internet connection. So they obviously didn't take any credit cards or debit cards of any kind. And oh man, so much stuff was happening at once. Let me just backtrack and try to remember if I get it right. Her like husband comes out. She was, because I asked her, where's the nearest ATM? And she was like, I don't know, let me ask my husband. And I thought that was weird. And then he comes out, and like it really, like again, I don't want to be judgy, but it really looked like they were like, related on some level. Like, they both had the same complexion with the red freckles. And they were both the exact same like weird height. They both had the same short fingers. Anyways, I don't know if it was a vibe or if it was just like a weird situation. Again, I was just determined to be like, this is cool. These people are fine. They're nice to me. It's good. He sort of came out. I was asking questions. Like he sort of didn't answer the ATM question right away, and he was asking me what I was doing. And then I thought maybe I should tell him that I'm a musician because, you know, my van's full of all those new guitars I just bought and all that stuff. So I still had that sort of. That's an instinct that I will have in every situation when I'm on tour. So I just sort of said, oh, we're traveling from, you know, Toronto to Costa Mesa, and then he was like, who are you, all musicians? And I'm like, maybe, you know, we can play good music sometimes. And then he was like, no, I'll come like from a long way. This is the best impression I can do of his voice. It's not good. It's like, you must be really tired. You need a lot of rest. He said that many times. Like he just kept repeating himself. And sometimes he would laugh, like butt head or something. Anyway, and I was like, yeah, sure. And I already had a room key in my hand. and it was room 7. And then the dude just kind of looked, and he was like, room 7? And then he looked to his like, wife or whatever, and said, give him room 9. Give him room 9, babe. And I was like, I kind of paused and was just thinking to myself, like, what's room 9? And then she did this thing, which I saw her do many more times throughout the night, where she had her hands flat on the desk, but when I just looked down and shake her hand and say stuff, she was like, room 9's not ready. Room 9's not ready. She said it twice. And he's like, no, give room 9, babe. It's a better room. It's a bigger room. These people need a lot of rest. They can travel for a long time. And then she's like, it's not ready. And then he convinces her. I give her a key back. She gives me the key for room 9. And I was like, sweet, bigger room. Thank you. And then he tells me where the ATM was. It turns out it's like a 25-minute drive 2 towns over to a 7-Eleven that's still open. Not just open because of its hours, but open like forever. Because everything in this town is boarded up, except these 2 weird hotels. So it's $50 cash. I didn't have $50, so that's why I went to the ATM. And I leave, and in my head I'm just thinking like, oh, that was extremely awkward and really weird. These people are creepy, but I'm not going to dwell on that. We're just going to have the directions to get to the ATM. So we're going to go there, and then since we get outside, Benjamin and Irma are standing outside. The man's just like chain smoking, and which is what he does. And I was going to say that we've got to go to the ATM. It's $50. I don't have $50. And then between the 3 of us, we have $50 in cash. So that's great. That saved us, 25 minutes. So I turn around and walk back in. This is the place, and I go into the front door, and they thought I was going to be gone for a long time, right? So right when I opened the door, they're like mid-conversation, and the dude was talking about how great it was that we had been there, and he was so excited that we were far away from home. And then she was just kind of standing there silently, and then she saw me, and I was looking at her. So there's her, there's the doors to the normal base room, and there's the dude. And she saw me, and she starts freaking. She's like, and then she turns and starts she does this. And then she says, get the fuck out of here. And then I look straight ahead, and there's a guy that had come out from the back room who, he was missing the bottom half of his neck. And it looked like, it looked kind of gory, and he was just walking. It was, sorry, I'm a bit of a cold, so my throat gets all that stuff. I have a lot of cold, actually. You don't want to use this microphone. So he I don't know how to describe it, but just fast, scuttle, just runs back, and she slams the door, and then looks, and then it didn't bother me. I was just okay, that guy is handicapped, he lost his legs somehow. It looked like they were lumpy red stumps. It was weird. And from the few seconds I put eyes on him, it looked maybe 2 weeks before his legs had been chopped off with an axe. So, I was just okay, these people are living a very different life than me, even though we're both very poor. So I didn't want to. It was kind of like when you burn yourself, and it doesn't hurt until a few minutes later. It was like that, vision. And the woman just being get the fuck out of here. Sorry if there's still children here. Anyway, I wasn't supposed to see that. And then the dude just kind of turns and just laughs. And he's just oh, you're going to the ATM? And then I said, no, we got the $50 between the 3 of us. And then he's looking outside. He's banding around. And he's oh, you have $50 between the 3 of you, huh? It was a lot of money. It was amazing that we had $50 between the 3 of us. And he was impressed. And then, anyway, I gave him the money. And then, that was it. That was it. It was weird. And I was okay, this weird place. I could hear a lot of people in the room sort of murmuring. and I could hear like a loud TV or whatever. So I have the key, walking into a motel, so all the doors to the rooms are outside. Walking to the hotel, Ben and Irma's driving the van up to where I'm coaching our room is, room 9, so that we can put the van by the room. The Ben is walking, and the Ben is like laughing, and he's like doing this. I'm like, Ben, what are you doing? And he had his arms in a window of one of the rooms. And I'm like, dude, like, why are you putting your arms through that window? And then he said, look, and it was like, there was no actual window anymore, it was just like a hole. And then there was just like no door. So a bunch of the rooms were just like these weird gutted out empty shells of rooms. So it was weird. And I was sort of, that was curious that we were staying in this place and most of the rooms were not functional rooms and didn't have windows or anything. And I was looking in the rooms and they were full of junk, like stuff. And the more and more I looked in those rooms at the stuff, it was like clothes and bags and suitcases and stuff. And it just seemed like a lot of stuff for everything. I don't know why it was there. Anyway, and in one of the rooms that had a window, there was just like the biggest, like scariest dog, just like standing like on the bed, staring out the window. Like, I go up to the window and it's just like right there. And that's when I hear the creepy husband, I hear him go like, it's time to let him out. And then she's like, yeah. And they open up that door. I moved along at this point and they let the dog out. On the way to room 9, room 8, there's a dude there. He's staying in the room. And I just described him as the cowboy. He was wearing a black leather duster, I guess it's called, with a black leather cowboy hat and boots with like actual spurs, which didn't seem out of place because we were in Colorado and his truck was parked in front of him. He was just like, he had his knee up on the wall, his head was down, couldn't see his face, black thing, and he was just like smoking. And as I was walking, like all of this only happened in like 2 minutes, like the weird stuff, but I'm drawing it out so that you can understand what was going on in my mind. Like I was weirded out. Let's just sort of pause for a second and like recap all the things I was weirded out. Everything in town being boarded up and the ATM being 25 minutes away. That other hotel that refused us. Those weird people in the dark. And the husband and wife who looked like they were related. God no nice. The dog in the room full of people's stuff, the no window. The list was grown in my mind. And the cowboy, I thought, oh, this is a cowboy, I should like say, good evening. So I'm walking by and I said, good evening. And nothing. Just the cowboy just didn't even move. I said it, like I didn't mumble it. Because it's a cowboy, you don't want to mumble good evening to a cowboy. So there was a chance he could have been dead, I suppose. Yeah, it was the all black leather hat and stuff. And the smoking, didn't move his head up, nothing. Spurs, like up on him. So that was room 8, we were room 9. It was at the very end of the area. And beside it, there was a weird dark alley and then another building that was totally dark and empty. Get into the room, and it was like, it was disgusting, right, as you can imagine. But it was doable. We used to move our stuff in. And then on tour, we sort of have this rule where we'll do like a bed bug check, everywhere we stay, so that we don't get, stuff carrying bed bugs into the tour, because that's a really common thing, especially when you're staying in, horrible people's basements or horrible hotels, and playing, shady rock clubs all the time. So we did it, and we lifted up the sheets, and it was like full of bugs. But they weren't bed bugs, they were these weird big moths that were all dead. So like you could actually hear them like crunching sounds. So then Irma, who was a driver, who'd been driving all day, she was such a positive person, and she was doing most of the denial for us. Like, she was just like, that's okay. We have sleeping bags, we'll tuck the sheets back in. We'll sleep on top of the beds with our sleeping bags. You know, this is the price of half a hotel room. And we're not going to drive through the Rockies at night, you know, with no brakes. And so, I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Keep in mind that they were outside the whole time I was in the office. They don't know how weird about it. But they know their own ideas, or their own general freak out of this, or whatever. I go to use the bathroom, and it's one of those hotels where the sink is on the outside of the toilet, the room with the toilet in it. And the sink was like cracked down the middle, and like, it looked like someone had fallen into it or something, like it was bad. So that was weird. And then on the way to turn on the light to the toilet room, I noticed there was just like some red on the wall. Just like that. So I was just like, oh, that's weird. Like, what do you think that is? And they were just like, oh, you know, whatever. Everyone was like, it's nothing. And then Irma was setting up her sleeping bag on her bed. Benjamin and I had our own bed, their own sleeping bags. I didn't have a sleeping bag actually. I was just gonna sleep on the bed in my clothes. And we're sitting there, and there's like a dresser underneath the TV that didn't work. And in between the two beds, there's like, so yeah, when you're sitting on the edge of the bed, you're facing this dresser. Behind you is a little table with its phone that was not connected to anything. And then above one of the beds, there's a hole in the wall, like this big. And I looked at it, and there was just like a little piece of a black plastic bag in the hole. And I kind of poked at it. And you can see into room 8 from our room. And I stopped right away because I was like, that is the Rude Cowboys room. You know? So I didn't want to like spy into his room. So I just sort of, so it was weird that there was a hole this big, like right above one of the beds. So that was weird. We didn't talk about much though, because if he was in the room, he could hear us. So we didn't really, we were just like, oh. So I was sitting on the edge of the bed, and then there's a dresser, and I'm looking at the dresser, and I just say, is that blood on the dresser? And Irma says, no way. And then we go take a closer look, and she's like, this nail polish. And she's like, okay, no more of this, let's go to sleep. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm looking at it, and I'm like, is that blood on the carpet? And at this point, I started feeling pretty scared. Like, I don't know, maybe I should have reported this to the police. I'm not sure. But like, it was intense. And then I'm looking at the dresser, and on the corner of the dresser, you can see. I wish I had photos of this on my old little BlackBerry, which I couldn't find. So I don't have everything, but someday, you know, maybe I'll show you if you see me somewhere, or you see me on the internet, you can ask me, Facebook or whatever. Photos of this where on the edge of the dresser you can see right where the dry like nail polish was running from. And then at the bottom of the dresser there was just like an outline. And then under the dresser was a dark, was a red color. And there was like, you could see the indent of like teeth. Like on the corner of the dresser. Right? And I'm like, I think like something really crazy happened in this room. They didn't know that they insisted on giving us this room. On the other hand, I really didn't want to do what the guy was listed with. I was the only one who knew how excited the guy was. But we were so far from home, we needed a lot of rest. So, but still, there's like this attitude of like, let's just fucking do this. Excuse me. And I'm standing up, Ben's sitting there, and Irma's sitting there. And after like a long time of silence, where we're all just, you can tell we're all freaking out in our minds, but we're not talking about it anymore because we need to get some sleep, because we have to get up at 6 a.m. and drive to Orange County, play a show in Rockford with some bands. So, after like, I don't know how long it was, it could have been a minute, it could have been 10 minutes, it was a long time. I just said, I saw a guy with no legs. And then it was like Irma just started freaking out and yelling. He saw she was doing this with her hands. She was saying, "You saw a guy with the legs, you saw a guy with the legs." You saw a guy with the legs. And then she was like, "You saw a guy with the legs. That's blood. We're getting out of here." And we all out in the van. And Irma was like so committed to her job. Was just thinking like, you know, I don't know what she was thinking. She turned to me and she said, "Well, you gotta get the money back." So, I just, sorry, that was science. It's gross. I just kind of like psyched myself up and did it. I don't know, I was already so far gone into the part of my mind that sensed danger that didn't matter. So I went into the place, and I rang the bell, and there's all these people talking, and the sound angry, and there's like shuffling, and this time there's a really loud dog barking and yelling. And the woman just kind of comes out again, and leaves the door closed. She's just like, "What's wrong?" And then I'm like, "We just realized that we drove through 2 time zones today. We actually gained 3 hours or whatever, and we're going to keep driving because, you know, we have all this free time now. So can we please have our money back so we can leave?" And then she just like stared at me, and then she put her hands on the desk, looked down, and just started doing this, and said like, "No, there's no refunds." And I said, "Well, you know, we didn't do anything to the room. I'm like, we're not going to stay here. We've only been here for like a half hour. Like, is there anything, you know, you can do?" Because at this $50 metal hospice, because we already knew we were going to have to stay in another hotel that was going to be 100 or more, because, you know, that's just what it's like. So, she was just, "No refunds, no refunds." And then I said, "Well, what about if you just give us half the money back?" She said, finally, like, she was, you know, inside. Oh, no, wait, sorry, this is the part I was messed up. After her saying no refunds for a while, I just said, "Look, there's bugs on the bed. It's gross. We don't want to stay here." And she was like, "No, the bed's fine." And then I said, "You think there's blood on the walls?" So I feel like I wasn't like scared of her. I feel like I could tell her and just make it sound like a genuine, like, you know, just like a consumer complaint. There's blood on the walls. We don't feel comfortable staying in that room. We don't want to stay here. We'd like our money back and no trouble, you know, for either of us. And then she was like, okay, let me just go ask my husband. And then she goes back into the room, closes the door. The dog is going off. And I'm just sort of inching towards the door that's out. I look at Irma, and she turns off the fan and just opens the door for me and just leaves it running. Which was very smart of her. And I can hear them talking through the wall, right? I hear all these other people asking questions. What's wrong? They're leaving now. You know, all kinds of horrible words that were said. And the dog is like loud, no one cares. And yeah, she says they're upset about the stain in the room of the fruit punch. And then I hear the husband go, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" And then she says, "Yeah, the fruit punch stain in the room. They say the room's dirty. They don't want to stay here. They want their money back." And he's like, "Oh, okay. The fruit punch stain." And then he they both come out, and I'm by the door, and he rushes over, and he's like, "I heard that you think there's something wrong with the room." And then I'm like, "Yeah, we're not staying here. We want our money back." That's just all I can say. I wasn't looking at it directly at this point. I had lost somehow hearing them talk about it, and hearing the dog going off, and even the bravery I summoned up was gone. And I was just like, "You don't want to stay here, here's somebody good." That was just my line. And she said, there was a family that stayed there last night. They had a baby. The baby still fruit punched, and I haven't cleaned it up yet. That's why I said the room wasn't ready. Then I'm like, okay, well, how about we don't get a refund, but we're not going to stay here. The husband was like, no, you have to stay here. You travel a long way, you need a lot of rest. Like, where you're from again, like, Canada, like, musicians, you got a lot of stuff in there, you got friends. He actually said that. And he was just like, you guys are on a long haul, like a long trip. And like, he was right, I guess, but like, it's just weird how he insisted on it. And then I just said like, well, we have like our money as if we did stay here, we're gonna leave. And then he was like, there's nothing wrong with the room. Technically, it's a room. And like, when I retell the story, oh no, I'll get back to that in a second. I went for the door. He somehow got between me and the door, put his arm around me, and just like pulled me in really close. And he said, there's nothing wrong with the room. You need a lot of rest. You've been traveling a long time. You should stay here. You and me, just the two of us. Go out of that room, and I will show you there's nothing wrong with it. And then I like pushed him, and ran out the door, and I hopped in, and then Irma like squealed the tires of the Dutch Caravan, and just like took off. And we didn't talk about it until we reached a hotel on the other side of Denver, and we stayed up like days in at that point, and it was like, we also hadn't really eaten dinner or anything, and this is sort of just like the funny little cherry on top. And this is like I know everyone loves to show Breaking Bad stuff, but like, when you're in like the America's like meth valley, it's like really crazy. It's not entertaining. I was trying to find some food at this gas station by the hotel, and I was in there for a long time trying to figure it out. The stuff they sell in Colorado gas stations is amazing. You get oxygen in a can. Because of the altitude, people need it. No. And this car like pulls up onto the curb and like it's smoking and dented, and the door opens and these two girls fall out of it and just start groping around, going like, oh. And then this guy comes in and he's just like, can I use your bathroom? And the guy just looks up and is like, yeah, sure. And then I see the guy, and he's bleeding from his eyes. Just bleeding from your tear ducts. Apparently, I looked it up, it's like something that happens if you do too much math. But the gas station dude was just like so like unfazed by it. Like, that's just every Thursday night. I got some chips and we went back to the hotel room. But so like all of the stuff that added up to that lake, it really felt like if we stayed in that hotel, we would have been like killed and eaten, and then they would have sold our stuff, right? But I don't know, maybe it was just like, now I don't know what would have happened. Maybe it would have been fun. Maybe they were just really wanted a guest. Anyway, don't go to Commerce City.
Thanks so much, Paul.